Hey Beasties, to here, and welcome back to the VDL Create. This is going to be the start of Season 7, in which this is going to be my draft analysis video. So going into this draft, I decided I wanted to go monotype again. However, I have been realizing that people started being more and more aggressive at taking my type earlier and earlier. As soon as my first pick, people started counter drafting me that pick. And so definitely was a little bit concerned about maybe not being able to get a good starting couple first picks before people started to steal my picks because they saw I was doing a monotype. And so I thought of a couple ways in which I could, mitigate that fact. I considered drafting a Pokemon that was very high value with the intention of trading it later. I considered, doing something like drafting very ambiguous Pokemons early, and things like that. However, I was able to, get permission from Womble to exchange my draft position with another team. As what I mean by that is I just drafted for someone else's name and they drafted for my name. So basically nothing really happened except I ended up drafting under the name of the Old English Eschewes. Going into this, I very much appreciate Gert Bilbo for being able to exchange with me. It was not necessarily like just an easy thing because we technically had to put in some effort to draft for each other's teams, and I appreciate them greatly. They helped me a lot with the process, and it was wonderful. And I appreciate you. So with that, I drafted as that team, and so I was likely able to get 3, maybe even 4 picks before people started knowing that Gert was going mono flying. And with that, I kind of hinted, I decided to go mono fly. So the idea behind mono flying is not necessarily a very cohesive idea. What ended up happening is I asked one of my good friends, pick a type for me to go mono type in, and they picked flying, and that is why I'm here. So in order to make the mono flying team work, I think there is a very important core that is necessary in the draft. And this is basically the core, which is an electric flying Pokemon with an electric immunity, the ground flying Pokemon, a water flying Pokemon, and a steel flying Pokemon. So the first one is Thundurus Therian, top left. It's an electric flying Pokemon with an electric immunity. The idea is, electric is common weakness of electric types, and in addition to that, it only has 2 weaknesses and it's just a very powerful typing in general. Next is the ground flying Pokemon and both Landorus forms. They are both pretty much equally valid on my team, and I could see an argument for both of them. But the main idea is that their typing gives them immunities to electric, neutral damage taken by rocks, and then they have super effective stab damage into both ground and electric as well. Next we have water flying Pokemon, with Gyarados being the best example by a large margin, and that takes neutral damage from ice, which is a big deal, especially when the top 2 both take super effective damage to ice. And in addition, it also does super effective damage into rock, which kind of makes it, I'd say, an even typing into rock, despite having, defensively not being the best into rock. And finally, we have the steel flying type, where Corviknight and Skarmory are kind of the best examples. Technically, Celesteela is the best, but I was not expecting to be able to draft it based on my draft plan. And the idea with that is that it takes rock and ice for neutral damage, and then steel is super effective into both rock and ice. And so the idea behind these 4 Pokemon is 2 of them resist rock, or will take neutral damage to rock, 2 of them take neutral damage to ice, and then 2 of them have electric immunities, which each of those are the main weaknesses of the flying type. And so that's kind of the main core offensively and defensively on my team. And so these were the Pokemon I thought were most necessary to make the team work effectively. So with that, I decided to go with my first pick as Thundurus Therian. So the idea behind this is that there was not a great replacement of an electric flying type with an electric immunity. The only other Pokemon that has that is Emolga, which is a tier 5 that is not offensive in the slightest, where Thundurus is a very offensive Pokemon. So Thundurus Therian is probably one of the best tier 2 Pokemon in the draft. In addition to being one of the best tier 2 Pokemon in the draft, its electric immunity is huge for my team. It has 140 something base attack, a special attack, which makes it do a huge chunk of damage, and its 101 base speed is very impressive. Its main downside that most people would point to is its lack of flying coverage, but that's not as big of a deal for someone like me because I'm running mono flying, and with the mono flying team, I will have plethora of flying coverage if I need it, and so it's not that big of a deal. So with that, my next pick, I ended up going with Tornadus. So this was not actually originally on my game plan, and I didn't really expect it to get to me as my second pick. I was expecting it to be gone way before I got it to my second pick. I honestly would have not even been surprised if it was gone before my first pick, but it somehow wheeled to me, and I was strongly debating not getting it because I actually didn't intend to ever draft it, but it just seemed like such a powerful Pokemon with Prankster, Tailwind, Prankster Taunt. It has very good speed stat of 111. It has very good special attack. In addition to this, also even has Defiant and a pretty good physical attack, so you can make it physical and counter like Intimidate. And it has just good flying coverage, which is obviously not necessarily going to be a problem for me, but it is good in the general sense. And so I ended up deciding to get it. I'm not sure if it was right or wrong because, again, it's not part of my main core and it wasn't necessarily my game plan, but it was such a valuable Pokemon that willed to me, and I just felt like I couldn't pass it up. So my next pick was deciding between Gyarados and Landorus. My assumption was after I made this pick, everyone knew I was mono flying. And with that, I said, okay, what Pokemon is the most likely to be taken if I go mono flying? And I said, Landorus, if I take, let's say, Gyarados, and I leave both Landoruses on the field, and people know I'm going mono flying, anyone who wants either of those Landorus forms are likely going to draft it before my fourth pick, because that is a Pokemon that anyone who paid attention to my team will know I'm intending to draft soon. And so I ended up deciding to get Landorus Therium. In the end, I think this may have been a mistake. So for reference, in Season 6, Landorus Therium went undrafted. And in addition, Landorus Incarnate ended up, I think, being drafted in the 5th round overall. And so it's very likely that they would not have been drafted. However, like I said, the main argument was anyone who wanted them would probably know that I also wanted them and would then have reason to draft them. But in the end, I don't think it would have been that big of a deal. However, I think 2 picks after this, Gyarados got picked up. And this was very sad because not only did Gyarados get picked up immediately after this, kind of spoilers, Landorus Incarnate actually did not get drafted at all. And so I actually could have not drafted Landorus until my last overall pick and been fine. However, with my decision to kind of be overly safe, I ended up losing Gyarados, which is definitely a huge deal because I definitely need a water flying Pokemon, and Gyarados is by far the best water flying Pokemon. The only other options being Mantine and Cramorant. And Cramorant actually went drafted in the first round, surprisingly, by Goomer, the reigning champion. So that was the biggest miss that I had, in my opinion. And with that, I definitely felt like I really needed to finish up my core. So with my next pick, I ended up going with Skarmory. So Skarmory was actually the only still flying Pokemon available at this point, but it was also one of the better tier 4 options for my team. There was actually only, I think, 5 flying tier 4 Pokemon, so there's not a huge selection, but it definitely is a big Pokemon on that. And being the only still flying Pokemon remaining, I decided that I should draft it probably earlier than I needed to, but I wanted to be safe because it's such an important component to make my team work, because the still flying type is needed for my defensive core. So with that, we continue on, and I ended up going with Salamence. So Salamence is basically the Gyarados replacement I had. So I strongly was debating between Salamence and Pelipper. I almost picked Pelipper. Pelipper is a water flying Pokemon compared to Gyarados, and however, it fills a very different role. It's mainly a weather setter. It has pretty good special attack. It's not versus Gyarados' physical attack. It's more of like a support mon. I'd say it has like Tailwind, White Guard, pivot out with U-turn, setting up the rain to get 100% accurate hurricanes for my flying team, which is a big deal. However, its stat distribution is just so low, and I was like, Salamence is just such a more comparable Pokemon to Gyarados, because Salamence has Intimidate just like Gyarados. It has Moxie just like Gyarados. It's more of a physical attacker like Gyarados. It has Dragon Dance like Gyarados. So it fills all of those roles, except it's not a water Pokemon, which means that I'm a little bit lacking on Ice Resist. In addition to that, both of my Intimidate Pokemon, and Landorus and Salamence, both have a 4 times weakness to Ice, which is a big deal because pivoting between the Intimidators is not as safe. Whereas with Gyarados, it'd be pretty safe because Electric is the electric weakness of Gyarados is immune by Landorus, and then the Ice weakness of Landorus is neutral to Gyarados, and so that core is a lot more consistent than the Salamence core, and that's kind of why it was a tough decision between the two. But I ended up going with Salamence because it's such a more powerful Pokemon in the general sense, and I think it's more versatile overall, especially because it can be a physical and a special attacker, and it's got 100 base speed, and has a lot of the major things that Gyarados has, except for its typing. So after that, I decided to go with Hawlucha. So the idea behind Hawlucha is twofold. One, I felt like I wanted some more offense into Ice Pokemon, and the fighting type ends up doing pretty well damage into Ice Pokemon, and I also takes neutral damage from rocks and also does super effective damage into rock Pokemon. So that's the main idea behind it. I considered a couple other options for this spot, and a couple Pokemon kind of got sniped for it. However, I kind of think this was one of the better options in that aspect of good offensively into 2 of my major weaknesses and defensively into 1, and having a good speed tier and being able to kind of be a pretty good offensive threat if you can do something like bulk up or something like that. So with that, I decided I needed to finish my defensive core, and so I decided to get the last remaining water flying Pokemon I could get, because because the only ones other one available is Pelipper, which I could not get at this point. And so Mantine was my pick. So Mantine, water flying Pokemon, which is important, but other than it being a water flying Pokemon, it doesn't do too much too exciting. It's very good specialty defensively, which is pretty good given the fact that I do have 2 Intimidators currently. In addition to that, a lot of the major ice and electric types coverage are going to be on the special side, which is good for Mantine. But for the most part, Mantine's just going to kind of is just there for some water coverage and being good defensively into ice Pokemon and doing stab damage into rock. So next up, we decided to get Scyther. So Scyther was probably the most powerful available tier 4 Pokemon. It has 105 base speed, it has 110 base attack, it can hold an Eviolite, making it very bulky, or instead of that, it can run a lot of more offensive type items because it is pretty good offensive typing. Like offensive stat wise. Its main downside is its typing is terrible for my team. It's got a 4 times weakness to rock, it has a weakness to electric and a weakness to ice. So defensively, it just takes all the damage that flying does, except for 4 times weakness. However, it is a very powerful Pokemon, and the only other Pokemon I would really consider in the tier that I wasn't planning on drafting was going to be something like a Fletchlander, which is not particularly exciting for me given the fact that I already have a better Prankster Tailwindmon in Tornadus. And that's the main reason that Fletchlander is, the main power of Fletchlander. So next up, I decided to go with my tier 5, which was Emolga. So Emolga, I mentioned a little bit earlier, it is a flying electric Pokemon with an electric immunity. Emolga is a lot more of a support Pokemon rather than an offensive mon of the Thundurus. It has like Nuzzle, Charm, Eerie Impulse to just lower opponents' attacks and speed, and it has a fairly good base speed stat, but its main downside is it's very bad defensively. and that's kind of where its problem is. I think Emolga definitely was the best tier 5 for my team, giving me an additional electric immunity. But other than that, I'm not sure how impactful it will be in the general sense. So next, I strongly was debating between two of the last three tier 3 flying Pokemon. So these are the two that I was considering, which is Sigilyph and Articuno. And then the last one that technically I could have picked was Butterfree, but I decided I didn't want another flying bug Pokemon. And also Butterfree's main strengths, which were Tailwind and Redirection, weren't particularly useful on my team. And like I said, his typing is not great, like Scyther's typing. So with that, we have these two. So Articuno, defensively, is very good stats. In addition, it does take neutral damage to ice, which is a big deal, because I was lacking ice neutral Pokemon currently. However, its main downside is its move pool is not good, and its 4 times weakness to rock is not good. And in addition to that, even though it takes neutral damage from ice, it doesn't actually have anything that can deal good damage into ice Pokemon. So, and then Sigilyph is a psychic flying Pokemon. It has I think 97 base attack, 97 base speed, 103 base attack or special attack, which is pretty good. It has moves like Light Screen, Reflect, Tailwind. I think it has Gravity. These are all really relevant moves that could be very useful. But in the end, I decided I wanted to go with Articuno because I felt like I wanted an additional ice resist. I think technically in my original team composition, this Articuno spot was supposed to be a Charizard. However, Charizard went very early in the draft. I think it actually was drafted before I picked my 3rd pick. And so I was definitely never going to pick Charizard that early. Charizard fills the same role of Articuno of a ice neutral Pokemon. However, unlike Articuno, its fire gives super effective damage into the ice type, which is a very big improvement to Articuno, who doesn't do that offensively. So, so basically, and then they both have the 4 times weakness to rock, so they very much fill the same exact role, except Charizard's offensively would be a lot better into the type it's supposed to counter. And so finally, for my final pick, I was debating between these 3 Pokemon that are all honestly not super exciting. So on the far left is Delibird, which is another ice flying Pokemon, and its main strength is it is the only flying Pokemon with the move Fake Out. However, its stats are one of the worst in the games, and its abilities are all really bad, and so the Pokemon is just overall a really bad Pokemon, and all of its strength is in the ability to have Fake Out, which is an incredibly powerful move and incredibly useful, especially at dealing things like Trick Room, which is something my team struggles with currently, or being able to deal with like Redirection, which is something that my team could struggle with maybe, or things like that. Next is Noctowl. Noctowl is pretty good defensive, or especially defensive, but it's a very bad defensive Pokemon. And then it also has like Roost, Calm Mind, and so it's a pretty good setup sweeper on the special defensive side. And it has an ability that allows resisted moves to double damage in Tinted Lens. And so basically you could do a pretty easy set of like Calm Mind, Roost, and then let's say just flying normal coverage or something like that, or protect, Roost, Calm Mind, and then just flying coverage. And Flying Stab will basically do the equivalent of super effective damage of a non-stab move to any Pokemon that doesn't 4 times resist it, which is very powerful. And so that's kind of the idea with that. And then finally we have Swoobat. So Swoobat has the ability Simple, which makes it whenever you change its stats, it doubles that change. So if you use Calm Mind, you get +2 special attack and +2 special defense, and that's kind of the main strength of it. Other than that, it's a lot faster than these 3. It has 113 base speed, and it also has Trick Room, so you can undo other people's Trick Room, and it also does have roost, but it's not as bulky as Noctowl, for example. And so in the end, I decided to go with Zubat. Noctowl was actually drafted by Gert actually right before my final pick, so I actually couldn't even have drafted Noctowl. And then I decided to want the second ice Pokemon, and the fact that in addition to that, Delibird just did literally nothing useful except for Fake Out. I decided Zubat was the best of the options. And so with this was the team I drafted going into the draft. And however, I wasn't quite done. I was strongly deciding which Landorus form I liked, because as I mentioned, Landorus Incarnate did not get drafted at all. So the idea of me originally drafting Landorus Therian was with Tailwind support from Tornadus. The slightly slower speed of Landorus Therian was not that big of a deal. It's I really wanted very powerful Earthquakes, and it having higher base attack made Earthquake a lot more powerful. The reason why I wanted Earthquake was because every Pokemon on my team is immune to Earthquake, so I have no downside of Earthquake, which is one of the biggest reasons people don't like Landers, is because you have to use Earthquake, and it can make it a little bit hard to use. However, in my situation, Earthquake is just the best move. In addition to that, I have a lot of pivoting Pokemon, like Thundurus with Volt Switch, Tornadus with U-Turn, Landorus with U-Turn, Scyther with U-Turn, and so I have a lot of switching Pokemon. I'm able to kind of switch in and out with pivoting moves, and that makes Intimidate a lot more interesting and powerful as well. So that was the idea with that. However, Landorus Incarnate, the other Landorus form, allows me to have a better mix of attack or special attack, rather than just kind of more of a physical attacker in this Landorus form. And in addition to that, its higher base speed makes it a little bit less reliant on Tailwind. And in addition to that, its ability Share Force actually makes it have a more powerful Rock Slide, even though it does not have as powerful Earthquake. And so, so overall, I was kind of debating between them, but I decided to make the trade and get Landorus Incarnate, because I think is a generally more powerful Pokemon. And though I do like the Landorus Therian, and I think is very good on my team, I decided to make the switch. I probably wouldn't have made the switch if my Salamence was to say a Pelipper instead, because I do want to have at least one Intimidate Mon on my team. However, with having an Intimidate Pokemon already, I decided to make the switch, and this was my final team. Overall, like I said, I kind of mentioned both of them. The only real Pokemon that I missed that would have been nice would be Gyarados and Charizard. However, I think my team is pretty reasonable to what I was expecting and hoping for. Doesn't mean I think it's that great. I definitely don't know how well I'm expecting to do, but I hope I should be able to do reasonably well. But with that, that's my team, and hopefully you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.